So it was about 10 years ago that I decided to mainly start collecting Chug figures. And the first two figures that I got were this here Generations Trax and the Reveal the Shield Bumblebee. And I absolutely loved this thing. But I recently upgraded to the Takara version, mainly because I just absolutely love that metallic blue paint, and for a character like Trax, who loves the way he looks, I think it suits the character much better. So the question became, what to do with the original? I realized that there is a character that I love that has been sorely underrepresented in today's market. That's right, the Decepticon who just wants to sing Loudpedal. So today I'm going to take you through the entire process of creating this custom. So let's get started. So we start with the disassembly, and as I always say, even if you're not making a video for others, it is still incredibly helpful to make a video for yourself of the disassembly process, because it is something that you can reference back to if you forget how any of it is supposed to go back together. It's a very useful tool to have, and one that I use quite frequently because this happened over the course of a few weeks and my memory is bogus. And one thing I appreciate about these older figures is the use of screws. A lot of the newer generations figures, they use pins, and that makes it a lot more difficult to take the figure apart and put it back together. So now that we have Trax in a million tiny pieces, we can move on to the paint removal section. And for this, you're going to want to use some acetone, which can be found in just general nail polish remover, and you're going to want to use some Q-tips to dip it in there. Be careful that you're not putting the acetone, if you pour it out from the canister that it's in, don't put it in any sort of plastic because it will deteriorate the plastic and you'll have a huge mess on your hands. I'm mainly going to focus on taking off the flames from the hood just because tampos tend to leave an extra layer. And unfortunately, even after I removed the flames, you could still see where the flames were. But once we add the paint and all of that, they end up looking fairly covered up, so it was fine. Here you see the remnants of what were the flames. And I end up taking some sandpaper to it to try and shave them down a little bit, which you're going to want to do generally on the whole figure anyway, just to get the paint to stick better. But unfortunately, the sandpaper trick didn't really work for the flames. And even now, after the thing is completed, you can still kind of see the outline where the flames were. But so if you're going to try to attempt this custom for yourself, just be aware, or any custom in general, just be aware that once you take the paint decos off, they might still be visible. And on the sandpaper front, you are going to want to use a fine sandpaper, just because you don't want to leave any terribly lasting detail. And don't listen to me in here. Don't use 80. Use 120 to 150 because that is the correct sandpaper to use. So right now I'm using just some general Scotch tape to cover up the windows to get this thing primed and ready for painting. This is a technique that I've used for years. I don't know if it's technically considered professional, but it's always seemed to work fairly well for me. So just taking strips of Scotch tape to cover up the windows, and then I will take an X-Acto knife to cut around the edge of the windows themselves and remove any excess tape, and that seems to work fairly well. Just note that after you paint will constrict, and any paint that is on the tape has potential to peel the tape up. So if you're going in for multiple coats, just make sure that all of your tape is still stuck down and applied properly, because otherwise you may get paint where you don't necessarily want it. So now we are ready to prime the figure. And what I like to use are these little skewers with alligator clips on the end to hold on to all of the individual bits. just so that I can move it around and get a good coverage on all of the surfaces. And what primer actually does is gives you a nice even surface that you can paint over. Paint with primer applied is a joke and will not work as well as just priming your figure. I'm also going to use this metallic blackish, purplish, brownish, goldish paint that I found on a whim. I didn't buy it for any particular purpose, but this purpose was perfect for it. And there we have the thing actually primed, and you can still see the flames, and I need to go over it a little bit more, but there we have it. And here we have everything primed. And since this is a total repaint of the figure, I went ahead and primed all of the pieces. And specifically, since Loudpedal's almost main color in robot mode is gray, I thought the primer might act as a decent color for the actual limbs, but we'll get to that. So the instructions for the pearlescent paint requested that I paint everything black first. So here is everything in the car mode, and some of the feet in a just standard gloss black paint. And then here is everything with the pearlescent paint applied, and it was kind of a cloudy day that day, so the reflection doesn't look too good, but the paint looked phenomenal. And here it is on the inside, just to give you guys kind of a better look about how the reflectiveness and the pearlescence works. So now we're going to start on some detail work, and specifically for her face, but a little bit of her arms and a little bit of her chest as well. Her face is kind of this like metallic-y teal color, so what I did was I took a metallic green and I took that kind of seafoamy blue in the background there and mixed them together to create this kind of metallic teal, and it worked perfectly. And this is where having a steady hand really comes in handy. If you don't have a steady hand, you may consider taping some things off. You also don't want to use too much paint. Just like using spray paint, you want to start with a little bit and build it up with several layers. And just making sure that you are keeping track of your mixture, trying to make sure that all of the paint matches with itself. Moving on to the red. There are red bits on her shins as well as her chest. And this is where the layers mentality and the patience mentality come in handy, because the red was really thin and I had to apply several layers and wait for each layer to dry after I applied it, just to try and build up that bold color. The reason that I didn't spray paint it was because the legs could have been fine, but the work on the chest is extremely tight, and it would have been very difficult to tape all of that off and to paint it. So here, this is where we are. The design mentality behind this was that the shins were kind of like vaguely vent-ish. So anything that looked like a vent on the robot mode got painted red, just for stylistic thematicity. So now comes a small but crucial detail, and that is the color of her eyes. I discovered that you can actually get a good interpretation of what colors would look good by placing any object of any color behind the face to figure out what it would look like. In different canons, she has had both yellow and red eyes, but I end up going with yellow just to add a little bit of variety to the Decepticons. And after a couple of days of letting the paint set, here is what the vehicle mode will roughly look like. And I end up grappling with the idea of adding some decals to the vehicle mode. She has some flame decals to match tracks, and I also have some flame decals. but at this point I wasn't sure whether or not I actually wanted to add them, but I cut them out to prep just in case I did. I also thought about using those kind of checkered flag decals, but they don't have a white background, so I decided against it just because the detail would have been lost. And then for the eyes here, I ended up using a gold Posca marker. I don't generally recommend using paint pens for your Transformers customs, just because they are shit for that. But for small work like eyes, it works fine, and I didn't really feel like busting out my acrylic paints for that. So now comes the moment of truth for the windows. And you want to be careful removing the tape, because if you peel up the tape, it may also peel up the paint that you have laid down, just because the paint would have connected the plastic to the tape. So you want to take an X-Acto knife and just retrace your steps along the edge of the windows, just to sever any connection that might have been. And then carefully remove the tape from the windows, and you should be fine. The plan, however, was to paint her windows as well. Her toy has these gorgeous purple windows, and I wanted to try to recreate that as best I could. And Hobby Lobby has this great tape. I don't know what it's called, but it's in the hobby section, and it's really good for masking off small sections, and it won't risk peeling up your paint when you peel it off. So I'm using that just to outline the edges of all the windows, and then using Scotch tape to fill out the larger voids, and then using this Tester's metallic purple lacquer to get all of the windows. And then here they are, and I'm going through the delicate process, emphasis on delicate, to peel the tape up and finalize the look. And here it is, honestly looking better than I thought it would. And I went ahead and just peeled up the tape while the paint was wet, so I didn't have to worry about any paint connection. So now I'm just going to do that to the rest of the windows, which you can see here. So at this point, we begin reconstruction. Not necessarily because I was done, but because I just really wanted to see the figure complete. Mostly just because I wanted to see if there were any more details that I wanted to add, but mostly just because I wanted to see the figure. And again, to emphasize the filming process, I did, in fact, in the weeks that it took me to do this, forget how the figure went back together, specifically how the thighs were supposed to work, and as well as her chest components, because there was some weird trickery with the transformation that I wanted to get right. So there was reference back to this video, so do that for yourself. I highly recommend. And then here she is in her then present state. And even right now recording this, I get really giddy just because I'm so pleased with how this turned out. And I retain that this may be the best custom that I ever make. And then here are the decals that I do inevitably put on, but I was really hesitant just because I absolutely despise water slide decals, because they only really work out for me about half the time. But we will get into that process right now. So we moved the process to my bathroom, just because I wanted to have easy access to warm water and good lighting. And the main issue that I ran into was that the flames were too long, which meant that I would have to cut the flames and bring them up onto the hood to keep the complete flame effect. So I cut them along the line of the hood and the roof as best I could, and I end up having to cut them even more just because once we got to the roof, there were so many different angles on the roof that it became difficult to apply the decals. So I'm still not 100% on the process of applying them, but basically the way that it goes is you want to dip the decals in warm or hot water for about 10 seconds. And then you'll remove the paper backing and the decals will stick to the plastic bit. And then you want to apply them where they will eventually go on whatever you're applying them to. It helps if the surface that you're applying to is also kind of wet, so I will take a Q-tip and apply a little bit of water to the hood and the roof, just because I think it activates the glue a little bit better. They are water slide decals. I don't know exactly how they work, but this is how I ended up with the results. And then you'll want to leave the decals in place for a little bit, I've found. You want to make sure that it's all stuck down properly, and I'll take the butt of the tweezers and meticulously rub over every millimeter of the decal just to make sure it's stuck down, because even then it probably won't be. The problem that I had with this was that even though some of the decal was stuck, some of the decal was also not stuck, and in a few cases it ended up tearing and sticking to the plastic as opposed to sticking to the figure. So patience and tenacity are what got this part of the project done. The whole process took me about 45 minutes to an hour. For two reasons. One, my not solid grasp on the application of decals, and the fact that they were so finicky, and I had to cut them into even smaller bits. Like the roof decals, I ended up cutting into 3 or 4 different bits, just again for the aforementioned angles that were on the roof. If anybody has any suggestions on how to better apply these things, they will be greatly appreciated. Thank you. And here we have them all applied, looking pretty damn good, if I can say so. They were the pain in the butt to apply, but the results I am unbelievably happy with. So now that that's out of the way, we can get on to some vehicular detail work. And we're starting off with some matte black to paint in the grille as well as the wheels. And I took a little bit of inspiration from a couple of Corvettes that I found online that I use in my head canon. But they painted the wheels black, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to go completely black like they did, or if I really wanted to leave it silver, which I thought also looked good. So I just started painting the spokes black, and that's what I ended up going with, leaving just the trim of silver around the outside of the wheels, which I think was a happy medium. And here is how they look overall. Looking pretty freaking good. Again, just taking your time to make sure you get paint in all the proper nooks and crannies. Again, as we mentioned before, having a steady hand, although you may have a little bit of trouble taping these off. For some stuff that I didn't film, I ended up going ahead and putting a Decepticon symbol and painting all of the lights. I used a silver for the reverse lights as well as the headlights, and then orange and red for the indicator and tail lights respectively. I also had some paint chip off of the shins, which may have been a result of me not sealing them, but I'm not sure. I also went ahead and painted the exhaust missiles silver, as well as all of the primer gray on the body, just because it was too dull. And here is Loudpedal all finished and looking pretty damn good. If I had to go back and add some more details, I'd maybe throw in some yellow here and there, just to spice it up a little bit. The paint chipping on the legs is kind of unfortunate, but if you turn the legs around, you don't see them anymore. In fact, you get to see even more of that gorgeous pearlescent paint. Looking back, I should have primed the thighs just so that they would look more cohesive with the rest, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal. And the vehicle mode is absolutely perfect. So thank you guys for checking this out. I hope you found this inspirational and informative. If you are interested, follow me on Instagram at GoodenEvil Transformers, just to keep up with all the latest reviews and customs and things. But anyways, guys, thank you for checking it out, and as always, stay creative. Till next time.